The Fantasia International Film Festival is back in Montreal. As always, this year is its 30th edition, running from July 16th to August 2nd. And in this list, I'm going to run through 15 of the many films that are worth watching at this year's edition of the festival. Number 15 is Her Private Hell. Her Private Hell comes from director Nicolas Refn, who is most well known for his film Drive many years ago. Recent Refn films have been polarizing, to say the least, and Her Private Hell is not an exception. The risk and reward here are essentially inseparable. Refn's late-style work can certainly be hypnotic, a bit indulgent, sometimes frustrating, but also gorgeous, and all of these things happening at the same time. Her Private Hell is the opening film for this year's festival, and whether folks love it or hate it is almost certain to spark conversation. And of course, a strong cast led by Sophie Thatcher and Charles Melton make this one definitely worth a watch. But given that it is already one of the more well-known titles from the festival, it's opening the festival, and it's actually going to be released in theaters just next week, it lands itself at number 15. Number 14 is A Safe Distance. A Safe Distance made its world premiere at South by Southwest, which is where I saw it for the first time. I also had the chance to sit down with director Gloria Mercer, as well as writer Aidan West, and stars Cody Kersley and Tanya Mercedes. Unfortunately, the star of the film, or one of the stars of the film, Bethany Brown, was not there at South by Southwest, but it was a great conversation with the rest of the team. A Safe Distance is a Canadian film following a woman stranded in the British Columbia wilderness who runs into this mysterious off-grid couple. And like many films that are set in the British Columbia wilderness, it is gorgeous. The landscape, the wilderness, the forest becomes a character in itself. We see the potential danger of this wilderness and what that symbolizes, the danger of strangers and human beings and men in particular. And also we see this sense of being drawn away from a life that is safe, but perhaps a bit suffocating, and as humans, how we are drawn to these new possibilities. The landscape in this broader context is used as both escape, or the potential for escape, but also kind of a trap. Ultimately, we see this tension between safety and desire, and losing oneself, and the possibility for reinvention. Number 13 is Black Zombie. Black Zombie is probably one of the more valuable films in the festival lineup. It is a documentary feature, but it explores, interestingly, the history of the zombie through Haitian voodoo, histories of enslavement, colonial violence, and spiritual resistance. And with so many zombie films and zombie-adjacent films playing at Fantasia this year and in the previous decades of the festival, it's a really important film to watch. We see how Hollywood and global pop culture have kind of transformed this idea of the zombie, and it is super interesting. It has been beloved by everyone, essentially, who has seen it at places like South by Southwest and other festivals like Hot Docs. Number 12 is Someone's Daughter. Someone's Daughter is making its world premiere at Fantasia, so there's only so much that I can draw from. I haven't seen this film yet, but it is one of the more intriguing Canadian titles in the lineup. Fantasia is a Canadian film festival. I am a Canadian, so I do like to highlight my Canadian films and filmmakers. Someone's Daughter follows a lawyer who defended a man against rape allegations. Years later, both are kidnapped and taken into the wilderness. This sort of approach has the potential to be heavy-handed, to really hit us over the head with certain themes, but I have some confidence that the director, Wiebke von Karelsfeld, apologies for my pronunciation, is going to do a great job with this material. While they may not be a household name, they did kind of break out onto the scene back in the day in 2002, winning Best First Canadian Feature at TIFF for their film Marion Bridge, which was actually one of Elliot Page's first roles, which they have talked and written about, just kind of an aside there. And it also features one of my favorite kind of underseen Canadian actors in Michael Greyeyes. Number 11 is Blaise. Blaise is an interesting French animated film that keeps lists like these interesting. It comes from Dimitri Planchon and Jean-Paul Guigue. Again, apologies for my terrible French. This animated film is built around embarrassment and social panic and failed communication and a sort of visual unpleasantness. It follows the Sauvage family, who are all desperate in different ways to be liked. Carol wants to repair her image with employees who dislike her. Jacques feels disrespected by his friends. And the son, Blaise, has learned to avoid conflict by basically just going along with everything. That is until he meets Josephine and he gets pulled into something a little bit more radical and impulsive. The animation style is super interesting and is kind of key to the satire. It might not work for everyone, but if you can buy into some of the absurdity and into the uniqueness of its animation, then it could end up being really, really high on some lists. Number 10 is Matapanki. It is a very punk film with a punk ethos. It is short, it's visceral, it's low budget, it is loud and politically angry at times, and it's proudly handmade. The film follows Ricardo, who is a punk who drinks, goes to punk shows, hangs out with his friends, and cares for his grandmother. But after drinking this strange alcoholic brew called Matapanki, he gains superpowers that activate whenever he drinks. He tries to use these powers to change society, but after accidentally killing the president of Chile, as you do, and triggering an international conflict, things inevitably change. He uses super cool black and white cinematography with this sort of punk rock aesthetic and a very DIY handmade texture, as I mentioned, which sets it apart from so many other films. Diego Mapache Fuentes, again, apologies for my pronunciation, is the director here, and I think it's best to read his own official bio. You can find this on Letterboxd and some other sites, and I'll read it to you here. He is a very handsome film director, accused of stealing the hearts of thousands of old ladies. He's also a fan of tangerines, making homemade bombs, and clapping with his tongue. And that description of our wonderful director pretty much nails the ethos of this film. It is unique, it is punk, it is different, and it's worth a watch. Number 9 is Teenage Sex and Death at Camp Miasma. Teenage Sex and Death at Camp Miasma is, let's be honest, probably number 1 on a lot of people's lists, and I can't blame anyone. The only reason it's not is because, well, if you're watching this video or if you're going to Fantasia, you're probably already aware of it, and it's getting a guaranteed theatrical release just next month. This is, of course, the latest film from Jane Schoenbrunn, who is quickly becoming one of the core faces in modern queer cinema. Their first 2 features were all going to the World's Fair, and I Saw the TV Glow, were both different, but very clearly showcased Schoenbrunn's talent. This latest project is no different. It continues this exploration of identity and genre and desire and media and sex and all of these things that have been so key to Schönbrun's work. The film itself follows a young director who is essentially given the chance to resurrect Camp Miasma, the slasher franchise, after years of poorly made sequels. But when they meet the former lead cast member, things start to go a little awry. There's a strong cast here, and in fact, it might be Schönbrun's strongest film yet. Number 8 is Freaks Part 2. Freaks Part 2 is the closing film of Fantasia this year, so that kind of already comes with some built-in attention, and it's an interesting point that we're at for directors Zach Lipovsky and Adam Stein. The original Freaks that came out in 2018 had a bit of a mixed response, but it also had a clear identity. Now these directors are returning to that world after directing Final Destination Bloodlines, a very large film, of course, part of the Final Destination franchise, and arguably the best Final Destination. Not trying to start a fight here, but it was one of the stronger entries. So we will see what they can bring back from that larger studio experience and apply to this Freaks ecosystem. Number 7 is Jim Queen. There is some wild stuff happening in Jim Queen, and that is very much the point. It is another animated film on this list. It is a queer adult animated comedy about a virus called heterosis that turns gay men straight. The virus sweeps through the Parisian gay scene, and we follow Jim as he becomes a social outcast in the gay community and races to find a cure before it essentially destroys the community that he loves. It is a bit of an absurd premise and certainly a difficult one to land, but again, the directors here really do a great job. Yes, it is a bit over the top in its plot and animation at times, but this excess is also quite central to the appeal of the film. It also uses this to explore very meaningful themes without ever coming across as preachy. Again, a film that is this proudly specific should not try to flatten itself or change itself to become universally palatable. It is so strong because it is so unique. And of course, Fantasia is a pretty great spot to play a film like that. Number 6 is The Fox. It is kind of strange that a film about talking animals that explore through a relationship fable ideas of infidelity and control and magical transformation is probably one of the titles that I would feel most comfortable recommending across the board. It seems to work with a range of audiences, and it really is tough not to enjoy. Of course, any film with Olivia Colman, even in animated form, is normally worth watching. As I kind of alluded to, The Fox takes place in this parallel reality where we have talking animals, and director Dario Russo uses this premise as a darkly comic way to look at relationships and this sort of selfish fantasy of wanting to change others instead of reflecting and kind of confronting your own failings. It is a very, very strong film. Number 5 is The Samurai and the Prisoner. Look, we've got to put some respect on Kurosawa's name. This is, after all, the director behind Cure. And while this film may not be Cure, it is still very, very strong. And it's a little bit different than some of Kurosawa's previous work. It's more dialogue heavy than many of his other films. It's not really a sword play, forward action. It's not just about violence or constant darkness and dread. Instead, we follow this rebel leader who's trapped inside a castle surrounded by enemy forces, and when the impossible starts to happen, they need to seek help from an imprisoned rival. The film rewards you for your patience. It is one of the longer ones of the festival at 147 minutes, roughly 2.5 hours, but it is worth that time if you're willing to give it. And Kurosawa has been putting out some really strong work lately with other projects like Cloud in recent years. Number 4 is Never After Dark. Any Fantasia list needs some J horror, and Never After Dark satisfies some of that itch. It has had a lot of early success, winning the South by Southwest Midnighter Audience Award, and then also the Grand Jury Prize at the Overlook Film Festival. So we can see again that this project is working with different kinds of audiences. It uses a familiar ghost story kind of foundation. We have a solitary medium who's assisted by the ghost of her dead sister, and that sort of sisterly relationship allows the film to explore some other interesting familial themes. It's not just about scares or mythology, but because of this sisterly relationship, we have this built-in emotional structure where we can explore grief and communication and the connection and overlap between life and death. Also, it incorporates some really cool use of reflection, both visually, but also tying back to its deeper themes. Never After Dark is already out in Japan, and it does have a limited North American release scheduled for the early fall. Number 3 is Drag. I was fortunate enough to catch Drag again at South by Southwest. A lot of these films played at the festival. It was on my top films of South by Southwest list after the festival, and I got this hat. So it was a great experience overall, and thank you again for the Drag team for handing these bad boys out. The premise for Drag is both simple and a bit ridiculous. We follow two sisters, played by Lizzie Kaplan and Lucy DeVito, who are trapped in this remote mansion when one of the sisters throws out her back during a robbery attempt, and as a result is essentially unable to move and needs to be dragged through the house to escape because the owner of the house has just returned. That owner is played by John Stamos as a character that you probably have not seen him play before. This film really does bring a mix of groans and laughs, and the directors never 100% go in the direction that you are expecting. They hit some familiar trope beats, but then are happy to switch things up, particularly at the end. Number 2 is You Are the Film. You Are the Film is a small but clever genre project that could play really well at Fantasia. The premise is built around this meta act of watching itself. We follow a screenwriter and a musician who are watching each other on a large theater screen. Ultimately, they discover that the person on the screen is not only alive and real, but that they are in fact watching back. This premise could easily become lightweight or gimmicky, but early response suggests that it is very much the opposite. It's not a film that I have yet seen personally, but seems to be very well liked, and the concept is interesting enough for me to put it this high. And of course, Fantasia audiences do tend to respond well to these sort of films that play with this cinematic language and explore the relationship between the viewer and the screen. And the number 1 film to watch at Fantasia this year is Bagworm. Having spoken with director Oliver Bernsen at the Calgary Underground Film Festival earlier this year, I was given a greater appreciation for Bagworm, a film that I already liked a lot heading into that discussion. While a plot synopsis for Bagworm is difficult, On the surface, we are following this kind of socially inept doomer who steps on a rusty nail and as a result suffers some sort of infection, and we watch his life devolve into deeper and deeper despair. But more interesting than the physical infection is what it exposes about something that is already rotting inside our protagonist. We explore themes of isolation and resentment and sexual frustration and self-pity, and ultimately see a man who finds it easier to suggest that the world is broken rather than looking inward. As part of my discussion with Bernsen, we talked about our love for films that are horrific and dark and twisted, but also films that are very slow, quiet, chamber pieces that are just people talking or inner thoughts. And the reality that these two seemingly opposite sides of filmmaking actually often have a lot in common, and is the case with Bagworm. Bernsen is using the horrific, the over-the-top, the gruesome to really reflect and look inside. And the lead here, played by Peter Falls, is amazing, with one of the greatest slash worst slash most amazing slash most horrific backseat freestyle raps that you'll ever witness. Thank you so much for watching. Like, comment, subscribe. Do all of those things. They are incredibly helpful to me. Go support your local movie theater. Go watch your local film festival, and have a wonderful day.